Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on.
Hey guys, James here again with another Civ 6 guide, and today I want to talk about support units. I find that support units are among the most misunderstood in the game, and while they might not always be necessary, it's undeniable that, like a good bro or a good bra, the right support can make your life a hell of a lot easier. So join me today as we discuss the different support units in the game and do a little bit of testing to see just how effective they really are. But before I start diving into the individual support units, I want to talk about support units as a unit class and some of the common mechanics that they share. First is that support units are considered separate from military units and can therefore occupy the same tile as one. They're also considered separate from civilian and religious units. In general, you're going to want a military unit to escort a support unit because supports don't have any attack or defense strength themselves.
I'm too weak. Don't kill me.
Luckily, due to how most support abilities work, this kind of happens naturally. If you want to be extra careful, you can even link up support units with a military unit so they'll never be Mr. Lonely. A number of support units have abilities that are stated to buff adjacent units. These buffs will also apply to units on the same tile as the support unit itself. But okay, now let's discuss the different support units in the game. Starting in the ancient era, we have the Battering Ram, which can be used to take down those pesky walls.
Help Joshua fight the Battle of Jericho. Yes.
For the longest time, I actually used to think Battering Rams would only work with units adjacent to the ram itself, but that's actually not quite right. Here's how they really work. As long as you have a Battering Ram next to a city center or next to a district with defenses, such as an encampment, the ram makes it so that your melee and anti-cavalry units will be able to do full damage to the walls. With Gathering Storm, Battering Rams only work against ancient walls, so the Battering Ram by design is very much an early game unit used to help with early war or taking out city-states. But okay, let's run a test. Here we have a couple of warriors surrounding a city with ancient walls. I'm going to send my warriors in wave after wave until they take the city. This ended up taking 14 attacks to take the city, losing 1 warrior. Keep in mind that in a real game, there will be more varied terrain and defense. So now, having supposedly learned from my past mistakes, this time I'm going to send my warriors in with a Battering Ram as support. With the help of the ram, the number of attacks needed was cut in half, taking 7 attacks and losing no units. Once you enter the classical era and research machinery, you'll then unlock the siege tower. If you have any previous Battering Rams, they can be upgraded to towers. Similar to the ram, if you have a siege tower next to a city center or a district with defenses, this allows melee and anti-cavalry units to ignore the walls completely and attack the city health directly. As of Gathering Storm, the siege tower will only work against medieval or lower level walls. So again, let's perform a test. This time, with our siege tower, we totally ignored the ancient walls and we end up taking the city in 5 attacks. Just for fun, I ran a couple of other tests with different levels of attackers, defenders, walls, and even on encampments and documented the results. Link in the description. One interesting takeaway I had here was that encampments have the same defensive levels of the walls in the city. So an encampment in a city with medieval walls won't be impacted by a Battering Ram, but will be impacted by a siege tower. So with all that testing in mind, I want to quickly discuss the Battering Ram and siege tower. I think this testing shows that having either a Battering Ram or a siege tower with your attack force can significantly reduce the number of attacks it takes to capture a city, at least compared to if you went in raw, no tower. Interestingly though, the difference in turns between a ram and a tower was not nearly as big as I would have thought, although obviously Battering Rams become obsolete once the opponent gets medieval walls. Regardless, if you do decide to go to war early, they undoubtedly will make a huge difference. Not only that, but reducing the amount of attacks it takes to capture a city generally will mean your units will have received less damage, which can snowball into a larger advantage down the line. And really quick, let's just take a moment to remember those who gave their lives to make this video possible. Next, in the medieval era, we have the Military Engineer. Military Engineers are special units that are unlocked at, you guessed it, military engineering, and they can only be built in a city that has an encampment with an armory, which is the second building you can create after either the barracks or the stable. Military engineers spawn with 2 charges which can be used to build a number of improvements. First, they're able to build roads, which typically are created through traders. However, since traders kind of go their own way, a military engineer can be used to create alternate routes. You can also build roads in neutral and hostile territory, which can be very useful since you can't send trade routes to someone you're at war with. This ability actually gets replaced once you research steam power because this grants you access to railroads. A little more on that later. Military engineers can also build forts, which are defensive improvements. These can also be built in neutral territory. Forts grant occupying units additional defensive strength and automatically allow them to fortify. So here you can see I have a warrior in a compromising situation. Without a fort, the warrior died to 4 attacks, but with the fort, they were able to survive an additional attack. It doesn't seem like much, but a fort and a key choke point with the right units and the right backup can make defending much easier. Just one thing to keep in mind, enemies can occupy forts you create, so just be cognizant of where you place them. Later on, engineers can also use charges to build airstrips, which act as bases for up to 3 aircraft to take off from. This can be extremely useful, especially if you might not have the capacity or want to spend time building multiple aerodromes. They can be built in neutral territory, but if another civ claims that tile, they'll also claim that airstrip. Engineers can also use charges to build missile silos, which act as forward locations for you to spread diplomacy from.
Nuclear launch detected.
Not only that, military engineers can also build mountain tunnels, which allow your land units to traverse through mountain tiles. Depending on your map layout, this can actually be really useful, but keep in mind that your unit can't stop in a mountain tunnel and must fully traverse through the mountains. Trade routes going through mountain tunnels gain additional gold as well.
But wait, there's more.
You can also use a military engineer charge to complete 20% of an infrastructure district, with those being the aqueduct, canal, dam, and you can even do the same on flood barriers as well. Finally, once you discover steam power, military engineers will replace the ability to build roads with railroads instead. This can be done without spending any charges, which is a really nice upgrade. When built, these will greatly increase the movement speed of land units, making it only cost a quarter movement point to enter that tile. This makes railroads particularly useful for transporting reinforcements. Just keep in mind that it costs iron and coal to build, and creating them will also emit some CO2. Similar to mountain tunnels, trade routes also get gold bonuses for going through the railroads. While I wouldn't generally recommend it, military engineers can also be used as pseudo workers. If you spend a charge, you'll be able to remove features and clean nuclear fallout. In the Civ 6 wiki, it actually says that they can even harvest resources, but in my testing, I don't think that really seems accurate. But hey, let me know if maybe I'm wrong. You can also remove or repair existing tile improvements for no cost. Military engineers are definitely very interesting, although I do find myself wishing that they had more charges. While I think they can be a bit situational, there's no doubt that having one handy can help with your warmongering, especially once you can make railroads. Next, entering the industrial era, we have medics can be upgraded from siege towers. Unfortunately, they do lose the ability to help with taking out city walls, but medics make it so that adjacent units which didn't move or perform an action that turn heal an additional 20 HP per turn on top of their natural healing. In my testing, I actually discovered that medic healing will stack, so theoretically, if you put your units in a compromising situation, you could fully heal them every turn. With the modern era, we unlock the supply convoy, which can be upgraded from the medic. They retain the medic's healing ability and also provide adjacent units +1 movement if they start their turn adjacent to the convoy. So here you'll see that these two warriors start with 3 movement, while the one who's 2 tiles away starts with only 2. I don't usually see medics and supply convoys too much, and honestly, I don't really use them much myself, but I can see them being okay. I think the main downside in my eyes is the fact that the healing won't occur if your unit moves or attacks that turn. So because of this, I see them being more useful perhaps in long sieges or perhaps as a place to retreat your wounded units. Also in the modern era, we start being able to create observation balloons. These grant adjacent siege type units +1 attack range. This can be incredibly useful for a number of reasons. First, this helps keep siege units out of city attack range, which, at least in my experience, seem to be targets that the AI will prioritize in these situations. The additional attack range is also useful for attacking from tricky terrain positions. So for example here, you can see that terrain and features like mountains, hills, and forests make it so that these catapults can't hit the city. If you reload the same scenario, but this time with observation balloons, you'll see that now we're able to hit the city easily breezily. The balloon itself has 3 vision range, which isn't affected by terrain, so this actually makes them decent scouts as well. The additional range should also provide more space for your other units to work with, which hopefully makes it easier to surround, siege, and eventually take the city. Also, keep in mind that most siege units take a turn to set up their attacks, so the additional range makes them able to attack earlier. Unlike with convoys, units don't need to start their turn next to the balloon either. Instead, here you can see that I'm actually able to move the balloons around to buff additional units who originally couldn't hit the city. With the advent of the atomic era and computers, we start being able to build drones. Drones are upgraded from observation balloons and retain their range ability, while also adding an additional +5 bombard strength to adjacent siege units. They also have a whopping 5 sight range, which makes them really great scouts. During my testing, I learned that while the drone will provide additional attack range to all siege units, it will only be able to provide the attack strength buff to artillery and rocket artillery. Artillery have 80 bombard strength and rocket artillery have 100 bombard strength, so an additional +5 bonus would result in a 5 to 6% boost in attack damage for each artillery. It's a bit weird though. I actually find the observation balloon kind of useful, and while the drone is just an upgraded version, I think maybe because of the timing of when drones become available and how you might just have stronger planes by then, I don't personally find myself using drones all that much. Regardless, I think both can be useful units, especially if you find yourself relying on siege units rather than planes. And finally, in the atomic era, we have the anti-air gun, which is unlocked at advanced ballistics, protects units within 1 tile from air attacks. In the information era, we have the mobile SAM, which is unlocked with guidance systems, and is essentially a stronger version of the anti-air gun. Here's my understanding of how anti-air guns and mobile SAMs work. Each has their own base anti-air combat rating, with AA guns having 90 and SAMs having 100. Only one anti-air unit will engage an enemy at a time, but having additional adjacent anti-air units will provide an additional 5 support strength per unit. The anti-air support rating lowers the strength of the attacking plane, making it perform less damage and also increasing the amount of damage that you do to the plane. And of course, I did a bit of testing to see how much damage the anti-air would do to each air unit type, and I was a bit surprised to learn just how difficult taking a plane down actually is, especially the fighter class planes. My testing also assumes that the enemy is attacking your units, like the warrior here, and not your anti-air directly, which would be
A bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
I'll be honest, while I think the ability of anti-air guns and mobile SAMs is definitely very useful, I think the main issue with it is the fact that I hardly ever see AI use planes, but obviously, that's just my personal experience. If you're scared of an enemy's planes, I think they're definitely worth building. They can even potentially cancel nuke attempts, so having anti-air placed in some key areas can definitely take someone by
Surprise, motherfucker.
And that's about everything I had for you today. Hopefully this guide was helpful, and let me know if I maybe missed any information or interactions. As always, thanks for watching, maybe click some of those buttons down below, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.